Hello everyone, welcome to LFI Educates. This is Miss Aben. In this video, we will be learning meeting life challenges from chapter 3. The topics are types and sources of stress, effects of stress on psychological functioning and health, then coping with stress. Here we will be emphasizing more towards stress management techniques. Then the last one will be promoting positive health and well-being. Each of the topics will be displayed as I keep on explaining one after the other for your easy understanding. Before we go further to types and the sources of stress, let me explain to you what is stress all about.
Well, we all know that in everyday life we experience lots of problems and challenges in our life, and none of us we can say that we don't experience stress. One way or the other, we does experience stress in our life. So the challenges, the problems, the difficulties, or the different types of circumstances that we face in our day-to-day life, it puts us into stress. The stress is derived from the Latin word strictus, which means the restriction or the tightening of our muscles. In other words, the psychosomatic effect that is there in us because of the physical and because of the mental pressure. When there is a problem in us, there is an outcome that we see in our body as well. So likewise, stress is an ongoing process that takes place between us and also with the environment where we live. And it is a continuous process that it has to be there in our life because it is a kind of a chain of struggle that is there for our existence and for our survival. Like normally, stress is compared with that of an electricity, because even when we try to understand the electric current, it is also like when the current is too high, it can even fuse the bulb or it can even damage the appliances that we use at home. Likewise, when we have high stress, when our stress is too much, like it produces a very unpleasant effect to our performance. And that is how it is said that there are we all have different way of handling the stress. So those people who handle the stress properly, the stress will help them to have a high chance of survival because they know how to cope with the stress. But there are some individuals like they find it difficult whenever any problem arises in their life. So likewise, such people, if they cannot handle the stress properly, it might have a very negative outcome. So let us remember that all stress are not destructive. There are two types of stress, eustress and distress. Here, eustress is a good stress because it is very healthy, and it is good to experience this eustress because it motivates us to do better in life. So likewise, an individual, those who want to get good marks in exam, with that eustress, it motivates them to study harder, and that's how they end up getting good result. But sometimes even this eustress has a potential to turn it into distress or to lead towards distress, because when we stress too much, when we try to do much better in life, sometimes too much of that tension might divert our attention towards distress, and which is very negative and unhealthy. Because just for example, an individual who works so hard, he or she is a very good student, and just he or she wants to get the best out of everyone, they started panicking too much, they study or prepare throughout the day and night. Then the moment you reach the exam hall, because of over pressure, they forget everything whatever they have prepared. So sometimes this eustress have a potential to lead towards distress. So life is full of challenges. What we have to do is, no matter what circumstances we experience, we just have to know how to balance everything. In that way, sometimes whatever problems or challenges we experience in our life, it might help us to increase the probability of our survival. So since you already know what is stress, I will be explaining about the types of stress in the next slide. Okay, now let us talk about the types of stress. In these types of stress, you will see that there are three major types of stress. The first one is the physical stress and the environmental stress, then come the psychological stress, and also the last one will be the social stress. In this physical stress, physical stress are something that changes the state of our body, which means sometimes when we overworked, it affects us physically, okay, or when there is a lack of nutritious diet in our body, we become too weak, or sometimes when we suffer due to some sickness, it affects our body, or sometimes when we have less sleep at night or we fail to get enough sleep, we can see that there is a change in the state of our body. So that is known as the physical stress. Then when we talk about this environmental stress, this environmental stress are like the stress that we experience from our surroundings, okay, which is very, very unavoidable. For example, it can be air pollution, it can be crowding, which means overcrowded and too noisy, or maybe too much heat during the midsummer, or maybe it can be even in the form of a natural disaster like earthquake, floods, and all this comes under the environmental stress. Then let us talk about the psychological stress. This psychological stress is also a type of stress. Actually, this generates ourselves in our minds, and this is very unique. Okay, the way you experience the psychological stress might not be similar to what your friend experienced, and this type of stress are very personal and unique to the person experiencing, and it is very, very internal source of stress that occurs from within. So in this psychological stress, let me explain four important sources of stress. The first one is the frustration, conflict, internal, and the social pressure, and many more, but I will be focusing under the psychological stress only four, which is frustration, conflict, internal, and social pressure. Here, under the psychological stress, why I said about frustration is like frustration comes under psychological stress because when we try to do something in life and when somebody just comes and hinders our way, or like they try to create some issues where we fail to achieve our desired goal, in that way we become so frustrated, so that affects us psychologically. Then the second one is the conflict. Conflict is something like when we are put in such a situation that we have to choose one between two or more incompatible needs, and whatever decision we have to take, there may be a kind of a conflict that arises. We are being pressurized to take any action that goes against the values of our values. In that way, conflict takes place because we find difficult to choose which is best for us. So that also comes under psychological stress. Then the third one is the internal pressure, which means like when a person wants to be too perfectionist, right? So when a person wants to do everything perfectly, sometimes such expectation can only lead to disappointment. So this internal pressure also comes under the psychological stress. Then the last one under the psychological stress is about the social pressure. This social pressure, it is something that comes from the people with whom we work in our day-to-day life or with whom we spend our time. So this social pressure is brought from the people who makes too much of demand from us, or sometimes this social pressure becomes too heavy for a person to handle because when he or she is even compelled to work with such person, so there might have a psychological stress experienced by the person. So this comes under the psychological stress. And the last one is the social stress. In this social stress, it is induced to us from an external factor, okay? And this is mainly because of the interaction that takes place between us with the rest of the people. It can be some of the example of the social stress can be, let me take the example of two personality. One is very introvert and the other one is very extrovert. So introvert person, suppose the moment he hear that it is compulsory for them to attend a party, it become very stressful for that person who likes to spend quiet evening at home, or who wants to spend a quality time all alone. And on the other hand, an extrovert person or an outgoing person might find so difficult to stay at home in the evening, which is very stressful for that person. So we individual, we vary from person to person when we talk about the stress. So this physical stress and environmental stress, psychological stress and social stress, all this comes under the three major types of stress. Well, in these sources of stress, let us learn about the life events, the hassles, and the traumatic events. So, in the life events, it is very common to all of us that we experience in our day-to-day life. Since from the time we are born till this very moment, like we keep on experiencing changes in a big way or in a small way. Sometimes changes come suddenly, or sometimes changes comes gradually, and all these changes have an effect in our life. And that's how many people they have even cop up, all of us one way or the other, we have even cop up to just have a normal life with the small changes that takes place in our everyday life. But many a times, being a human being, when we experience the major life events in our life, we fail to cope up easily, and that's how the stressful situation sets in. For example, like life events can be like when like after marriage, after a long term of happy married life, something happened that turns out where a couple has to have set for a divorce, and maybe even a breakup of a long term relationship. All this creates a kind of difficulties for an individual to cope up with such situation, and that's how life events also it considers to be as a kind of a source that creates a stress to an individual's life. Then the second one is hassles. When we talk about hassles, it is very personal, and this such hassles, it is experienced by the individual mainly because of the happenings that takes place in our daily life. It can be noisy surroundings, or it can be like quarrelsome neighbors, or even in like when we experience electricity and water shortage, or maybe traffic jam and so on. So all this comes under the example of hassles. You can even put more examples which you find relevant to it. So sometimes, like attending such hassles in life, sometimes we find it difficult to handle the situation, because this such hassles sometimes have a very devastating consequences, a very not so healthy outcome, because individual find it so difficult to cope up, which other people find it difficult to understand what we go through or what we experience. So that comes under the hassles. Then the last one under the source of stress is the traumatic events. In these traumatic events, it can be like the events, especially like accidents, or maybe it can be in the form of an experiences of a natural disaster like an earthquake, floods, and so on, where an individual lost their own belongings, their own property, or maybe even lost their own loved ones. So in such type of situation, the effects of these events is very severe, that it may even occur after some lapse of time, even in terms of maybe the person might suffer from flashback memory, even in dreams, or such experiences might even lead a person to have an intrusive thoughts and kind of a negative thoughts all about himself or about life. So when an individual experience all these traumatic events, sometimes it even affects the relationship that he or she shares with the rest of the people. So in such situation, such people need a kind of a professional help to overcome from such type of trauma, and therefore to cope up, to have a better life. So all this comes under the sources of stress. Under the effects of stress on psychological functioning and health, we will be learning emotional effects, physiological effects, cognitive effects, and behavioral effects. And all these are very simple to understand, and I'll try to bring some contextual examples in order to make you understand better. So let us start with emotional effects. Emotional effects are those effects when an individual experiences stress in life. We will see that the effect of stress in our emotion can be understood as our feelings. So an individual experiencing stress in life will start displaying, or we can even see a kind of a mood swing in them, or they will even display a kind of an erratic behavior where they will always alienate themselves from the family or friends, which means they will always stay aloof from the rest of the people. They always love to be all alone, and in such cases they might start experiencing a kind of low self-esteem, or they might even experience like where their confidence level will go down, and such will experiences will lead to a very serious emotional problems where an individual will experience anxiety and depression as well. Then comes the physiological effects. In these physiological effects, when an individual start experiencing the stress in life, they will have lots of effects in terms of your physiology, which means there will be a kind of a certain hormones released in our body, such as adrenaline and cortisol, which will mark a kind of a changes in our body, like heart rate, the blood pressure level effect, and will also affect the body metabolism and the physical activity. And such changes that takes place in our life for some point of time to some certain moment, such function will be very effective under the pressure for a short period of time, but it can be very damaging to the body in the long run, because the main reason is when we have physiological effects, the effects of the physiological effects due to stress, we might end up releasing epinephrine and norepinephrine, which means it will slow down our digestive system and therefore expand the air passage in our lungs, and we will even start experiencing the increase in our heart rate. Then there will be it will narrow down even our blood vessels. So these are some of the effects that we are going to experience in terms of our in terms of our physiology when we experience stress. Then the third one is the cognitive effects. In these cognitive effects, when the person is over pressurized with so much of stress in life, and as the stress keep on continuing in their life, one will suffer from mental overload. Like when the mental is overloaded, when an individual is overloaded with stress, that individual will lose their ability to make a sound decision. And as a result, why an individual, when they have stress in life, what makes them to have a failure in terms of making a good decision in life is mainly because of the cognitive effects of stress. It will make them to experience poor concentration level, and it will even reduce their short-term memory capacity. And the last one is the behavioral effects. In these behavioral effects, when an individual experience stress in life, we can see some changes even in terms of their behavior, in the form of maybe eating less nutritional food, or maybe increasing the intake of the stimulants such as caffeine, or excessive consumption of cigarettes, alcohol and other drugs such as tranquilizer, they will become so much substance dependence, and sometimes overuse of tranquilizers can be very addictive and will even make the person to experience poor coordination, loss of concentration, and you will even experience dizziness. And to some individual, we can even see kind of a behavioral effects like they might even experience insomnia, which means they might find difficult to fall asleep at night, or we will even see kind of an increase of like kind of an irregularity in terms of their classroom attendance, or maybe even in their workplace, or we can see a kind of a reduce of work performance in that particular person when an individual experience stress in their life, and this comes under the behavioral effects. So with this, we conclude the particular subtopic that comes under the effects of stress on the psychological functioning and health. Well, let us learn the stress management techniques. As I've already discussed in the earlier slide about the source of stress, the types of stress, and the effects of stress, we have already learned that stress is like a silent killer and that kills us every day. And we really need to take care of our own lives, like rather than just ignoring what we are going through, because it is estimated that stress plays a very important role in our physical illness and diseases, because individuals suffering from hypertension, heart disease, ulcer, diabetes, and even cancer are all linked to stress. And due to lifestyle changes, stress keeps on increasing, and it is now kind of a global issue. And that is how school, colleges, institutions, communities are all coming up together, showing some concern about knowing the techniques to manage stress. So let us learn 6 different types of techniques how to manage our stress when we experience stress in our life. The first one is the relaxation techniques. It is a kind of a technique where it helps us to reduce the stress, and it involves deep breathing exercise along with muscle relaxation, just to calm down your mind and therefore to relax your body. And you can do this like by starting away from the lower part of the body, and therefore allows it to gradually progress up to the facial muscle, and you can keep continuing this for some time. Then comes meditation process. It is more or same like that of a yoga, because it involves meditation where we need to concentrate to some particular state of mind. We need to refocus our attention that brings about an altered state of consciousness, because it involves such a kind of a thorough concentration that the meditation will make an individual to unaware of any external factors, and therefore it helps the person to reach a different state of consciousness. And then comes biofeedback. In this biofeedback, as I've discussed in the earlier slide about the physiological effects, it is a procedure where we have to reduce the physiological aspects of stress. And with the help of biofeedback, we need to give a feedback to our own self relating to the physiological activity that is going on or what we are experiencing at the moment. Here in this biofeedback, we have 3 stages. The first one is awareness, then second one is control, and the third one is transferring. In this awareness, you need to first aware about yourself, like what are the physiological responses that you are experiencing at the moment regarding your heart rate, regarding your blood pressure, and so on. And once you know, or once you are aware about your physiological response, then you will be able to control it. And once you know how to control it, you need to transfer such factors in your everyday life. Then comes exercise. Exercise is also one of the technique that makes us or keeps us active all the time. And regular exercise improves the efficiency of our heart rate, enhances the function of the lungs, maintains good blood circulation, lowers our blood pressure, reduces the fat in the blood. There are lots of positive impact because of exercise in our body, because it even improves our body immune system. And some of the exercise can be walking, running, cycling, skipping, etc. And that is how it makes us active in our day-to-day life. And one must practice this exercise at least 4 times a week for 30 minutes at a time. And we must always remember that each time we have session, we must have a warm-up phase, then only we have to do exercise. After that, we need a cool down phase. Then with all this exercise, it really helps us to reduce stress in our life. Then come creative visualization. In this creative visualization, it is all about kind of a subjective experience, means we all might have different experiences. And in this creative visualization, one can have an imagination. But before we go to that imagination, we need to have or we need to set a particular goal. Because once we set a particular goal, it will help us to build confidence in us. Then when we do this creative visualization technique, it is always good to have kind of a quiet mind where our body is relaxed and our eyes are closed, so that we will not be disturbed by the environment that surrounds us, and also by the unbidden thoughts that is bothering us. And with this creative visualization, once we, after imagining oneself with our own desired goal, we can therefore convert such imagined scene into reality. Then the last one is the cognitive behavioral techniques. This techniques is all about because cognitive is all about thinking, and in this cognitive behavioral techniques, because of our irrational thoughts, or because of our negative thinking, it might affect our behavior, it might affect our performance in our day-to-day life. So in this cognitive behavioral techniques, all the irrational thoughts or all the negative thoughts or beliefs will now change into positive and rational ones. So these are some of the stress management techniques which all of us can apply when we go through a certain phase of life where we are unable to manage oneself. Promoting positive health and well-being. When we try to understand this promoting positive health and well-being, it is all about when we struggle in life, and in that process of struggle, with the help of good social support and with the help of good emotional support, we overcome the problems that we go through. Likewise, once we survive the stressful phase of life, we are prepared to fit for future crisis, which means we are ready to face the challenges that await us. So likewise, in this promoting positive health and well-being, we're going to study about the stress-resistant personality, life skills, health, and also the social support. That comes in the next slide. But in this very slide, we will be studying about the stress-resistant personality, where the recent studies by Kopasa has shown that individuals with high of stress but with low level of illness share 3 characteristics which are referred to as the personality trait of hardiness. Here, hardiness simply means a set of belief about oneself, okay? A belief that an individual have about oneself and also about the world and how to interact with it in their day-to-day life. And in this hardiness, it talks or it consists about 3 C's, and those 3 C's are commitment, control, and challenge. So this commitment is all about an individual's commitment towards particular tasks, responsibilities, work, or maybe towards their society, towards their family. Then control is all about the control that an individual have over their sense of purpose in life or certain direction in life. Then challenges is all about when changes takes place in life, an individual, they just consider it as a normal and they accept it positively rather than considering it as a threat. So this comes under the stress resistant personality, and in the next slide we will be discussing about life skills. Well, let us continue to learn about the life skills here again. This life skills, it is all about the positive behavior of an individual that makes the person to deal effectively with any types of given situations or the problems or challenges that they face in everyday life. So under these life skills, we will be discussing about assertiveness, time management, rational thinking, improving relationships, self care, overcoming unhelpful habits. So, here, when I talk about assertiveness, assertiveness is all about an individual's behavior or the skill that helps him to clearly communicate or clearly or confidently speak out his or her own feelings, needs, the wants, and the thoughts to the other person. And this assertiveness is a type of a skill or where an individual feel to share or try to confront the other person without hurting other person's sentiments by sharing their feelings or their likes and dislikes. Or and the time management here, it talks about the way an individual prioritize the time or the quality of life in a very systematic way. In this time management, an individual will learn how to set a time or how to plan a time, and therefore like work out all the events one after the other systematically. And once an individual is good in time management, then definitely that individual will experience a very stress-free life. Then come rational thinking. Rational thinking is all about trying to overcome all the negative thoughts and therefore convert it into a positive feelings. Maybe most of the times in our present day life, instead of encouraging oneself or motivating oneself with positive thoughts, we end up having lots of negativity within oneself and also to the surrounding. So rational thinking is one of the life skills that motivates us to imbibe a good kind of a positive spirit or a kind of a positive vibe in order to keep motivating to face challenges in life. Then comes improving relationship is all about one thing that we need to know when it comes in terms of improving relationship. A person needs to have three important skills. Means we need to be a good listener. We need to listen to what other people say. Then secondly, we need to express our own feelings, what you want or what you think. And the third one is we need to learn how to accept the person's other person's opinions, their feelings, even though it is so much different from our own way of thinking. So this is how we are going to improve relationship in our day-to-day life. Then the fifth one is the self-care. Here self-care is all about maintaining oneself, taking care of our own health, and relaxing oneself, because when we start caring for oneself, we are much better prepared emotionally and physically to tackle the stress that we face in our day-to-day activity. Then come overcoming unhelpful habits. This is the last one that comes under the life skill, and here we will be focusing more towards three important habits, that is perfectionism, avoidance, and procrastination. Perfectionism is all about trying to be perfect all the time, and when we try to be perfectionist, like most of the time it becomes very stressful because we are never satisfied with what we do. We always wants to be perfect, and that's how we having thoughts in what other people do, and that's how we end up being overloaded with burdens. And the second one is all about avoidance. Here, avoidance is all about we try to put away the issue, and we try to refuse to accept or to face the harsh realities of life, or sometimes we refuse to accept the bitter truth. So sometimes, instead of avoiding the truth, it is always good to accept it and therefore move on in life by not committing the same mistake again. Then the last one comes under procrastination. Procrastination is like something that we always like delay in doing something. Then we always say that I will do it later instead of doing at the moment. Then that's how the moment we keep on procrastinating our work, then definitely the outcome will be we are going to face failure in life. So these are some of the life skills that we need to practice in our day-to-day life, so that once we have all this in us, definitely we will be able to deal any type of problems or challenges that we face in our daily activities. Health. When we talk about health, it need not necessarily mean that every time we have to talk about the sickness or the illness alone, but under this health, we can discuss about the physical, the mental, the social, and the spiritual well-being of an individual. So we will be discussing diet, exercise, positive attitude, and positive thinking. So when we talk about diet, it talks about the balanced diet. And when an individual experiences a good balanced diet in life, it will definitely have an impact on one's emotion. It will make the person to lift one's mood because he or she experiences more of positivity, more of energy. Then it will help the person to prevent from different types of illness or sickness, and therefore strengthen the immune system that will make the person to feel better to overcome different types of stresses in life. And the key to healthy living is like we have to always remember that we need 3 important meals a day, and therefore keeping a good balanced diet and also intake of good nutritional food in our body definitely helps us to overcome stress in life. And this intake of nutritional food might depend upon individual to individual, relating to the activity we do, or depends upon the genetic makeup, depends upon the climate where we live, and also from the perspective of our own health history. So this comes under diet. Then when we talk about doing exercise regularly also plays a very important role in promoting our mental health. Like exercise can be in terms of aerobic exercise, like maybe swimming or maybe jogging, cycling, and all this have a positive impact in our life because it reduces our tension, anxiety, and depression as well. Then come positive attitude. Positive attitude is all about having positivity in everything we do. We started having a sense of purpose in life. We take up responsibility in life. We accept failure in life, or we like try to tolerate whatever circumstances that comes our way, and we are open to new ideas, trying to accept other people's point of view. All this comes under positive attitude. Then positive thinking is all about, it is also about like thinking positively and therefore trying to overcome all the stressful events that takes place in our life, and always trying to be optimistic whatever life brings us. But here in this positive thinking, one thing that we have to remember is like an optimistic person, a person who is optimist, always use more problem focused coping strategy, and they are very open to new ideas. They seek advice and take help from other people. So this comes under the health, and in my next slide we will be discussing about social support. Social support. In this social support, it talks about the existence of resources available for an individual where he or she can rely upon in times of need or in times of difficulties. So under this social support, we will be discussing about the tangible support, information support, and emotional support. Now, the tangible support is all about the assistance that involve in terms of material aid, which means when you are in need of something, you received in terms of money, in terms of goods or services, and so on. For example, when you are absent, when you were absent in the classroom, one of your friend provide you with a note. So that comes under the tangible support. Then information support is all about you are going through a stressful phase of life events where you are preparing for your board exam. You have no knowledge or no information about how the board exam process. Then in such situation, one of your seniors provide you with all the necessary information required to sit for the board exam. So as he or she has already experienced appearing such exams, then this type of support comes under the information support. Then the last one is the emotional support. Emotional support is all about support that you receive from friends, from families, and from someone to whom you feel close to, where you are being valued, where you are being reassured once again that you are being loved, you are being cared. So all this tangible support, information support, and emotional support comes under the social support, and it is said that social support effectively reduce the psychological distress such as depression or anxiety during the time of stress. And it is this social support that helps an individual to develop a positive well-being in life, and it is therefore considered that with the help of this social support, it helps an individual not only to promote oneself individually, but with this social support, it leads to mental health benefits for both the giver as well as for the receiver.
With this, we come to the end of this chapter. Along with this video, I would suggest you to refer the summary of the chapter which was provided to all of you for your better understanding. Take care and stay safe.